Hey, this is Cody Pfeiffer, and in this lecture or section of our assignment, we took to learning about differentiated instruction and how it pertains to our classroom and the kids and students that we will be teaching in the future, rather than the traditional classroom that has been set before us, for what we had gone through and what we probably had experienced as children. This instead takes the idea of adjusting to the students that are struggling or that are gifted even, and pushing it towards them that need the additional help or need less help than other students. So what is differentiated instruction in and of itself? Now, as I just said, it's a system that works towards helping those um, or helping every student bring out their maximum potential, to bring forward what they should be learning in different varieties and creating different pathways for different students. So this helps to bring out their maximum potential within each student rather than trying to teach a one size fits all to a certain students. We take the opportunity to create a split kids into groups based on their idealisms and their strengths and weaknesses, and this helps to help them, you know, uh, grow and get past the idea of the traditional classroom. This differentiation of students that we split, based on three categories that we'll talk here in a second, it really helps work towards helping students regardless of their disabilities, possibly language barriers. If we see that a lot of students or a certain group of students struggle with language barriers, maybe they're Spanish or German or who knows, French, we can split them into a group and kind of work with them in different ways, give them different kinds of assignments, that will, while they're learning English and working towards the learning of English, they can also be keeping up with the reading that's happening in class with different assignments. Whereas, a gifted child that is, far above the others may get something a little harder in its aspects, so that they don't begin to fall behind in what they're learning. Not fall behind, but you continue to prosper on the advanced learning that they already have. So this is a group differentiated instruction as a way to split them into groups and teach them in different ways that will help foster their strengths and help cover their weaknesses of the different groups. And as explained later in the section, it's very one of the very great aspects, or one of the aspects of differentiated instruction, is ongoing assessments seen throughout the teaching year itself. So instead of just having a quiz at the end, we need to continue to monitor and assess exactly where these students and children fall, so that we can continue to tailor our curriculum to help those groups that we have created. So how do we differentiate our instruction? Now, this is based on learning about the students themselves. So we can do this a number of ways through, first off, is their readiness. Now, this is their skill level, so how good they are at reading, how well they perform math, how well they can memorize, you know, and this can be seen through a variety of ways, mainly looking back at past transcripts or even possibly pretests that, kind of place them in where they understand what they're learning at the current time. Now, readiness plays into the idea of, pulling apart the gifted learners and then the average learners and the ones who may struggle with the assessment or the curriculum that we're going to be placing in front of them. And this allows us, again, to tailor our assignments or the homework that they may be getting to better help them learn at their level. If you give something to a struggling student that they don't understand at all, you haven't taught them anything. They're going to not understand what they're reading. They're not going to understand what's going on, and it's going to just further hurt them than help them. The second one is interest. This is pretty pretty self-explanatory. What piques the interest of the student? So a student might love math and might absolutely hate English, and we can kind of fit them together to something that really piques them and helps them learn. The third one is we can break them into a kind of ideology of their learning profile. So this goes off the idea of, I'm sure everyone knows their ins and outs of how they best learn. And a learning profile is the idea of, I'm really good at lecturing. I'm really good with lectures. I'm good at taking in information when I hear it. But I am terrible when given examples to do myself. So your hands-on work doesn't seem to work well with or as well as when you're able to hear something and write it down, take it back, and learn about it. So the learning profile is exactly what that is. It's the idea that we each have different ways of taking something in and creating it into the knowledge that we instill in ourselves. So breaking them down into these groups. How do teachers differentiate instruction? It's based on these three categories. We base it off readiness, so how well each student is doing towards their skill level, the interest of the students, so we can see how well they're interested, and we can break them down into their learning profile, how they learn best, so that we can decide maybe a full-time lecture throughout the class isn't the best ideal. Maybe a small lecture to help the students that do lecture, and then give a hands-on activity or examples or have them do some problems. This again pertains into the idea of how do we differentiate instruction, and it's the idea of having a assessment or a constant assessment rather than a final assessment. The constant evaluation of students allows us to tailor better to their needs and their growth. And we can break this again down into three, whereas a traditional classroom will base their ideology on achievement alone. A differentiated classroom should be based off how well the student has grown. You can list their habits, although achievement still is something that needs to be pertained to. How well is the student learning these curriculum? Because in the end, that is the end goal, to have them grow and reach the point where they have accomplished what you set out to teach. But including growth into their notes, including their habits into their report cards, it looks past just the idea of, hey, I got an A, but someone who got a B that started from a D, or someone who got an A that started from an A, you can see the growth and just how much that could pertain to their confidence. So the idea of how do we see this pertaining into the classroom? So how can we see differentiated learning in the classroom itself? So the first step into kind of accommodating is to be sure to explain the situation. So right off the bat, tell them that this isn't going to be a traditional classroom. This is going to be something that's differentiated. You guys will have different assignments based on your learning perspective and based on the idea of how you learn and the interest in you learn and how far ahead or behind you may be struggling in certain subjects. And we will tailor this to you as a student, and be sure to always, inform the parent of this as well. Because the parents in the end need to be active in their students or their child's education. And them knowing that their assignment might be different than maybe one of their friends, and that this doesn't send them through some kind of loop wondering what's going on in the classroom. Because with a differentiated classroom, it is different than what people do. It will create learning in different attitudes in the classroom, and it will be challenging for the students. So the next thing in a differentiated classroom is to be sure the furniture is established to complete exactly what you're out to do. So if you want to split them into groups, you have groups of 4 tables. You can have a one large table that creates plenty of room for the students, and then the teacher's desk shouldn't necessarily be in the middle, like in the center of the classroom, but maybe perhaps on the left. You want to create room to where you can monitor the classroom, while they're working, and this creates room for you to adjust the noise level based on how bad it is or how rowdy they may be getting. Now, wall space and storage, this comes into the idea of having a well-organized classroom, because with all these different assignments that are going to be different groups, it will create a bit of a hectic kind of chaotic spree if not taken care of in the classroom. So having the correctly labeled, stuff will help better keep it all in line. And as for the wall space, this is going to pertain to the lessons that the students are learning throughout the course. You can have something on the wall, that's inspirational all throughout the year, but to have like something like the rules and then something more like maybe what the lesson they're pertaining to is to a certain degree. Now, with the classroom, you also have to have a set rules. And now this is just kind of in any classroom, not just specific to the differentiation classroom. So what would you see in the classroom if you were to walk in on a differentiated classroom at this time? Now, if you start at a traditional classroom, the move to a differentiated classroom is not something that's going to be, boom, instant. It's something that takes time, and you're going to see it kind of progress over the days or throughout the years. If you're kind of transitioning, it's not something that you're just gonna kick into instantly. Now, in the classroom for differentiated learning, we're going to see that we can create different assignments based on the different groups that we create through the readiness, the interest, or the preferred learning that they may excel at. In the differentiated classroom, we're going to see constant assessment, something that traditional classrooms don't always pertain to, but they could also take it into consideration because it is a great way to monitor. We need to pre-test, formative test, and post-test, something, or not even test, just some way to see how exactly they're coming off the lesson. Instead of getting to the end of the lesson and seeing that they just didn't understand it, as you go throughout the lesson, you can kind of pick up and learn exactly where they're falling off at, You can see where some of the kids are struggling at, split them into a group, give them an assignment that tailors to that very topic or subject. And in the differentiated classroom, this really plays a support for struggling students. So we can see struggling students get a much better feel because they're able to work with people that are also struggling. They're also having the problems they are having. And then, again, we are splitting these kids into groups based on the three categories, or at least one of the categories pertaining to that certain time period that we are working on those assignments. So then we're going to talk about some scenarios that were given and why they may not work in a differentiated classroom and how we can go about maybe coming out with some way to fix it. So scenario 1 says that there's an instruction that is delivered primarily by lecturing. And one of the three categories that we look at when we're looking at differentiated learning is the ability of learning ability. The idea that some students just they don't learn the same as other students. While a lecture may be detrimental and vital to one student, it may completely go over another one's head. We have to detail and pick apart different ways of teaching, not just giving a lecture, the full 50 minutes of the class period, but instead maybe a 15 to 20 minute lecture over the history of the United States, and then more of a hands-on activity to base on the history of the United States. Maybe like you have to put together a timeline, or I give you a certain amount of here's the events, and you put them in order based on what time they happened, within history. And this gives a opportunity for those who learn based on lecture, and then those who learn based on more of hands-on activities. Scenario 2. This says that we are grouping students at the beginning of the year based on their previous year's achievement scores. Now this is based on one of the three categories again. Basically, we are splitting them up and completely basing them on their readiness. Now, we're not even basing them on the readiness of their current path, but of how they were last year, which can completely change over, a summer break or a break. And this also hurts those that are excelling in the category.